Hello, my name's Simonize, and welcome to another Simonize video. I am a classic Andy, and I am not ashamed. I quit playing retail World of Warcraft in original Wrath of the Lich King, then came back for Cataclysm, decided it was stupid, and haven't played it again since then. More recently, I've been having a lot of fun playing on official classic servers these past few years, but guys, it's 2023. We can definitely make some changes to this game for the better. In this video, I'm going to talk about 3 major changes I would make to classic World of Warcraft that I think would improve the game, and then a rapid fire changes section with some hotter takes. As usual, I'm not going to waste your time, so let's get right into it. The first change I would make is to rebalance or rework the classes. This is mostly relevant to the vanilla version of the game. We all know Warrior is simply the best DPS class in the game, but what is the point of having all these other DPS specs in the game that output literally half or even less DPS than the best class? Why even have protection as a specialization for paladins when they don't have a taunt or a way to replenish mana during an encounter? There are so many specializations in Classic that are either entirely non-functional at their supposed role or are so bad at it compared to others that they're irrelevant. I do not think it would do any harm to the game to have better class balance. We're not asking for perfection, we're asking for better. This can be done by rearranging talent trees or giving certain classes spells at level 60 that they've only gained in later expansions originally. You don't even need new abilities or talents, but that wouldn't hurt either. The goal is to freshen up the classes, to bring the weaker specs closer to the better specs, and to make the non-functional specs, well, functional. I think reworking and rebalancing the classes would bring an immense amount of freshness to the game. The world in vanilla World of Warcraft is beloved by the players, and our characters are the lens through which we experience that world. With different characters, we have a different set of tools to tackle the challenges presented by the world, and we can have a new experience without having to rebuild an entire world. Rebalancing the classes is certainly not an easy task, but I think the payoff could be massive. It opens up loads of new exploration and excitement of not knowing what optimal strategies are, finding new uses for old items, and more. As a bit of an addendum to this point, and before we move on to the next one, reaching the goal of having weaker specs perform better could also be helped through gearing. This goes a bit beyond just changing the classes, but a simple implementation could be to use tokens for all of the tiers of armor in Classic and add additional armor sets for each class to accommodate different roles. Even as a pure DPS class, I know I'd be excited to see 2 different DPS sets to choose from with different bonuses. Okay, point number 2. Instead of focusing on the vanilla version of the game, this one pertains mostly to Wrath of the Lich King. This is a big one, and I think it'll be the most contentious one in the video, so I'm just going to say it straight up. I think having difficult hard modes that also reward the best loot is bad for Classic. Now that you're done reacting and have unpaused the video again, let's talk about why I think that's true. And let's talk a little bit about Ulduar, which is the first time hard modes have really been introduced to the Classic game. Looking at progress statistics on Warcraft logs as of April 2nd, the end of the 11th week of Ulduar, only 29% of guilds who killed at least one boss in Ulduar have killed all hard modes. That's less than 1/3 of guilds. I'm counting both Algalon plus Yogg 1 Light and Algalon plus Yogg 0 Light as all hard modes for this 29% figure. These clears have access to all the loot in the raid, and if you're killing anything less than this, you do not have access to the best loot the raid has to offer. I think from those statistics, it's fair to say that Ulduar hard modes are simply too hard. Most of the player base cannot defeat them. When the best loot is locked behind the hardest difficulty, and that difficulty is too hard for more than 2/3 of the player base, group leaders are strongly incentivized to be very picky with who they invite to their groups. This brings about a much higher level of gear score checks, parse checks, achievement checks, and other gatekeeping methods being used by players. And just to be clear, rightfully so. They do not want to spend an extra hour or 2, or maybe not even clear the raid, because they brought someone who can't successfully monitor fire trails, landmines, rocket barrage, spinning up, shock blast, napalm, and frost bombs all at the same time on Mimron hard mode to get a chance at Star Shard Edge. Did you expect to have fun and relax in Ulduar? Well, you expected wrong. These group leaders are right to be so picky, and at the same time, their pickiness means the average Joe trying to chill and play World of Warcraft is now being refused group invites and struggling to participate in the raiding content. Average Joe doesn't get to fully experience the new content. Just like Magic the Gathering's $1,000 booster pack 30th anniversary edition, this content is not for you. It's for the elite. In vanilla and TBC, outside of a few hiccups, the majority of the player base could complete the raid content and have access to the most powerful and exciting items. You didn't need to have an army of elite gamers who researched the raid 4 hours prior to its release to have a reasonable expectation of clearing it. In this time, difficult PvE content was entirely player-driven through speedruns and speed boss kills. That difficult content was entirely opt-in. You would not miss out on any loot if you chose not to participate. So the only people who participated were the people that actually wanted the difficult content. With a much lower bar for performance just to clear the raid, pickup group leaders had much less incentive to filter and gatekeep who they invited to their raids. They needed some competent players, but they would still clear the raid even if 10 or maybe even 20% of the people couldn't handle Huygens' slime dance mechanic. The average Joe could clear and experience the same raid as the elite speedrunners and access all the same loot and feel like a full member of the World of Warcraft community. I think if you're going to have difficult hard modes like in Ulduar, they should either be cosmetic only rewards or reward more loot instead of strictly better loot like they do now. I'm a bit hesitant to even say more loot, because that still gives a pretty strong incentive to clear it in the hard mode, which leads to these gatekeeping activities. The best loot should definitely not be locked behind difficulty levels inaccessible to the majority of the player base. I think the game is better with fewer divisions of in-game difficulty levels and having the baseline be accessible to a large majority of the player base. Let the players invent their own difficulty if they want that. The third point I want to make in this video, I think, is a slam dunk. I think it's the easiest W and requires the least justification of anything here. Get rid of the current server structure. Maybe it was a technical limitation in the past, but we aren't in 2004 anymore. Restricting players to servers just causes frustration and artificial barriers to letting players play with who they want. Just heard about Classic WoW and you gave it a try, and then you found out your friend plays on a different server? Well, you're effed. I guess you have to abandon your character and start again if you want to play with your friend. Your server had a huge population during the expansion launch, but now, predictably, has far fewer players leveling and you can't do leveling dungeons? I bet no one could ever see that problem coming, certainly not any companies with decades of game development experience. Don't worry though, you can pay Blizzard $15 per character to transfer onto a server where you can actually play the game, and then $15 again when that server dies too. I think there is some sense of community and coolness that comes with a smaller game server, but I think it's very easily outweighed by other realities of small servers. You can't find groups for leveling dungeons, the auction house either doesn't have the trade good you're looking for, or one person bought out all 200 solid stone and listed them for 500 gold a stack. Literally no one can craft the rare recipe you're looking for, and the only raid groups that are at times you can play already have full rosters. Region-wide servers, I think, are the most optimal solution from a player perspective. Put players into significantly larger pools, so you almost always have the sufficient critical mass for the game to function. Leveling groups can be found, trade is alive and well, and raid pugs are plentiful. Those are my three main points for improving classic World of Warcraft. To me, the most important one is the first one. Rebalancing the classes both freshens up the experience and makes it so you don't have this abundance of dysfunctional or irrelevant talent specializations. Now, it's time for the rapid fire section of hot takes and slightly weirder changes that I've thought less carefully about. Ready? Number 1. World bosses currently have an enormous random spawn window between 24 and 48 hours. These giant windows mean the content is only accessible to the absolute most degenerate of classic WoW gamers to both monitor the spawns and assemble a team at any hour it might spawn. Involving yourself in that content is extremely toxic to your real life. Trust me, I've done it. I suggest world bosses spawn at fixed times. Use multiple layers to accommodate as many people that want to show up as possible, but allow multiple raid groups worth of players in each layer. Fixed timers means everyone knows when it's happening and shows up to fight for the boss. It's an event, and we have way more epic battles over the bosses. To ensure these epic battles occur, The world boss spawn areas could be PvP arena zones like the Gurbashi Arena. It doesn't matter if the opposing raid team is also Alliance, they'll still try to murder you to take this boss. Okay, that's probably the most wild one in this section, but let's move on to number 2. Number 2, I want to get rid of stupid job duties in raids like Sunder Armor, Expose Armor, Curse of Recklessness, Curse of Elements. The jobs are things that players do that detract from their primary role of damaging, healing, or tanking, but overall help the team. You've got some weirdos that get off on that kind of thing, but I think the majority of people just want to do big dick damage and are annoyed or sad when they have to suffer an individual DPS loss to apply some buff or debuff, and they get into stupid arguments about who has to do it each week. I think the better way to implement debuffs like this is like the Savage Combat talent that combat rogues have in Wrath. It provides a minor attack power boost, so you're going to take the talent for that reason anyways, and it also makes it so something you were already going to do, poisoning the enemy, applies a debuff for your team. Perfect. Now you get to pump and provide value to the team. Number 3, make all legendaries work the way Attunements does with a splinter system. Glaive drops are hype, and I see the coolness there and the excitement, but it's also really frustrating to have no control over if your character is going to get a 12% damage boost or not based on an extremely rare random chance. You also like doing multiple binding runs after raiding Encourage each week because your tanks still don't have Thunder Fury? Yeah, me neither. Number 4, no more attunement quests. Holy hell, TBC was bad. It was so annoying to play multiple characters, and the thought of making a new character knowing I'd have to repeat some 25-step quest chain to be able to even zone into a raid was a huge L. If accessing the content in your game requires a flowchart like this, that's a problem. Number 5, dual spec should be in the game from vanilla onwards and not be a Wrath-only feature. Make it easier for players to try new things and vary their playstyle. This is good. The last one I've got, number 6. PvP honor rewards in vanilla are way too powerful, and the process to get them is way too degenerate. If you can get a weapon in phase 1 from PvP that isn't replaced until you get loot from the last boss of the last raid, that's a problem. If getting that weapon requires you being more degenerate than any other degens on your server, that is also a problem, and similar to the 48-hour world boss spawn windows, makes this content inaccessible for any normal person. Well, that's it. These are my 100% objectively correct opinions about Classic World of Warcraft, and frankly, if you disagree, you are wrong. What changes to Classic would make you want to play through it again? Are there any of the changes I mentioned things that would make you not want to play Classic WoW anymore? Let me know in the comments, and I will see you next time.